This is the All-Star Networking Show with your host, Cathy Paper.
All right. Thank you so much for being here today. We got my dad, Mark Paper, and I calling in from Wayzata, and Dave Kansas joining us from St. Paul. Dave, I'd love if you'd introduce yourself to the listener, and you can say whatever you want about Mark and I in your introduction and how we're connected to each other.
Well, I hope we have more than one listener, but I'm Dave Kansas. I'm a media executive and consultant. I grew up in St. Paul, which is how I know both Cathy and Mark. Cathy and I went to school together, and Mark taught us everything we know and made sure that we did the right thing. As a journalist, I worked at the Wall Street Journal most of my career. I worked in New York, Tokyo, London. Also did a couple of startups in the technology sphere. And it had a great chance to travel, live in a lot of different places. And like a lot of Minnesotans, I'm back in the same zip code I was when I was a little kid, where me and my two young children run around the same streets I used to run around in, and the rules are the same. They got to be home when the street lights come on.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. So, Dave, Mark, do you have any recollections of Dave that you want to share?
The most recollection I have, Dave was a classmate of my daughter, Cathy, who went to St. Paul Academy. And I would say with some regularity, if I came home from work at noon, I would find David in front of my refrigerator taking food.
Yeah, well, you always had bags available. That was helpful.
With a big smile on his face. But to his credit, even then, David, as much as I know, has street smarts, and he's a sharp young man who doesn't take himself that seriously, which is a great quality.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
Well, I think the kitchen was the hangout place, and back then we didn't have all the Paneras and Chipotles and whatever, so we'd sit at the kitchen table, and I think Francie and you guys stocked the fridge well enough, so we were the go-to spot. But
I think Mark felt I wasn't getting enough food at home. I think was generally his takeaway.
Nah, you guys were growing boys, so. But it's all good. So actually, I love that you noticed Dave had the street smarts. Let's talk about sort of how your career just catapulted from being a college football player to getting into the broadcast and media. Was street smarts part of it, or?
Well, there's a fine line between street smarts and foolishness, as I'm sure anybody will tell you. I did play. I played college football at McAllister. My claim to fame is the last game I ever played in. We beat St. Thomas, which was a big rival in the Twin Cities. And they no longer available for McAllister to play. So that's the last time McAllister ever beat them. And that was some years ago.
Yes.
And then after a couple of years, I was like, I'm going to college closer to my house than I was going to high school, which is kind of unusual. And I decided to get on with my life, and I always wanted to be a journalist. And I hadn't really traveled, but I had this vision in my mind that New York was where all the journalists were, just because you see them on TV and things like that. And so I decided I'd go to school in New York City. I hadn't been on a plane until I was 17. I'd never been to New York. I applied, and I somehow got into Columbia College undergrad. They don't have the journalism program is a grad program. And I showed up in New York in January with an Army duffel bag. I got off at the wrong subway stop, ended up in the middle of Harlem, which at that time was a little not the kind of place you wanted to be. It was the mid 80s, late 80s. New York was a pretty rough town. And so I remember getting to campus, getting a room, and before classes started, I went to church like a good Midwestern boy. And I went up to the pastor after the church service, and I said, I'm new in town, and I'm going to become a journalist. And a bunch of gumption, and he introduced me to the dean of the college, who I met with the next day, who said, I've got these tickets to some dinner tonight. I don't want to go to it. It's on campus. Why don't you go? I went to the thing. It was the Columbia DuPont Journalism Awards, and there's Ted Koppel and Peter Jennings and Barbara Walters, and I'm wearing my Mickey Mouse tie from graduation, and the plastic buttons on the blue blazer and the whole deal. And the guy walks up to me, and he says, "What do you do at school?" And I said, "Oh, I work at the radio station." And he goes, "Oh, really?" So it turned out he worked for NBC Radio, and so then I called him every week for about 2 months until I got the glorious job of answering the phones at NBC Radio Network News from midnight to 8 in the morning. And that was my first job in journalism.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Midnight to 8 in the morning, you answered the phones?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy because my first class was at 9. So I would work all night, and then my first class was at 9 in the morning, and it was a 2-hour class with a break in the middle. And in the break, I'd go out and fall asleep on a couch to get, a 15-minute nap in. And the guy who'd always wake me up to make sure I got back into class was a guy named Paul Greenberg, who's still one of my best friends to this day. And that's how we met, was him saying, hey, buddy,
you got to go to class.
Got to go back into the classroom. And so that was he was, and then it turned out he was also in loved sports. He became I actually did end up working for the school radio station along with the school paper and some other things. And he became the play-by-play announcer, and I became his color guy for football and other things. And during the time I was there, Columbia football was in a 44-game losing streak in the middle of it. So it was kind of, I learned how to say losing, bad, stinks, a lot of different ways. And I was doing the radio with him in October of '88 when we beat Princeton to break the losing streak. And the quarterback for the Princeton Tigers at the time was a guy named Jason Garrett, who then went on to be a coach of the Dallas Cowboys. So it was a fun little experience. And I actually almost played football for Columbia, but I decided I wasn't going to play very much, and I'd never played for a losing team, so I decided not to play for Columbia. Instead, just did the radio thing. So
excellent. And okay, all these people, the fact that you can remember the quarterback's name from the rival team and those connections of things, were you always that good at building relationships and knowing people, or was that part of your smart skill?
I was cursed. Well, he played for the other team, but
I know
the guy who played for our team was Matt Fox, the television star, who was in Lost and I think a few other shows. So we had the better looking guy, I think, at the end of the day. I was cursed with a bizarre memory that a friend of my parents said I had a lint roller for a brain, that everything got in there and nothing ever came out. It just all got stuck in there. And so when I wasn't playing sports and doing everything else when we were in high school together, I was also on the high school bowl team. And we won the state quiz bowl championship my junior and senior year. And that, in fact, was the first flight I got to take. Was SPA. Our school flew us to Dallas for the national tournament my junior year. And, but I did remember things really well. But as a sidelight, I also did everything in high school it was possible to do. I remember with going through the yearbook with my son not too long ago, and he just looked at me and said, "Dad, you're on every page."
Well, you did. You would play the sport, and then you would go be in the play, the lead in the play.
Yeah, and then I was the chairman of the student discipline committee, and I was on the school council. I worked for the school paper. I was in the student activities committee, high school bowl. Yeah. Fortunately, there wasn't really a debate team until the very end. Otherwise, I probably would have done that too. So, but it was a lot of fun. But yeah, I have a weird way of remembering things. Um, and yeah, I guess it's a good gift to have. But to be clear, those high school ball teams had four members, and the captain of our team both years was a guy named Steve Levitt,
Ah,
who wrote Freakonomics and obviously was carrying the team unless the question was about sports. That's usually where I came in.
Nice. And Tom Jew and James Templeton,
Correct.
coached
And
by
then
George
and then
Leiter.
and then my junior year, there's a guy named Bill Tomjanovich was on the team. And when I was at Columbia, ESPN did a sports trivia tournament, and I recruited Tomjanovich to join me and another guy to be on the Columbia team. It was hosted by Chris Berman, and it was back when Chris Berman would give everyone nicknames. So I was Dave Carry On, my wayward son, Kansas, and you are carrying on, was what he called me. And then I'll never forget was so Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell were like the big answers to a bunch of NBA questions back then. And I knew one went to San Francisco and one went to Kansas. And I got that question wrong. And Chris Berman says, "You of all people, how
Oh,
can you get that wrong?" Because the answer was Kansas, and I am Kansas. So that was kind of a mistake.
oh, you of
Um,
all people, Kansas. I love it. I love it. Okay, so what was one of the ones you got right, either in the high school trip into Dallas
oh,
or
geez. Um, were they, I mean, were they signed to surrender for the Japanese signed to surrender in World War II? I got that right.
Mark, do you know that answer?
On the
no.
USS Missouri.
Oh, I'm not on the
Um,
Missouri. Now I remember it now.
yeah. I can't remember. Well, the question in the sports thing that was kind of funny was it was basically like this famous Yankee shared a name with one of the three Stooges. And I rang it and said Lawrence because it was Larry, Yogi, Berra, and
Uh,
Larry, whatever, Larry, Flo and Mo or whatever the three
Larry
Stooges
Curly
were.
Moe, Larry
Yeah,
Curly Moe.
so I said Lawrence, and he goes,
Uh,
It
well,
was
okay,
funny.
so
It was before the internet, right? And so, as a young kid, and Mark will attest to this, you learn your sports trivia based on what teams playing where you grew up.
yep.
And there was no NBA team in the Twin Cities growing up. I mean, I was too young for the Lakers, and two had left before the Timberwolves showed up. So we're there in the first game. We managed to win the first game in the sports trivia tournament in college, and none of us knew any NBA things at all. So it was before the internet. So you got out the old sports almanac and you looked at it and you said, okay, the NBA, the answer is going to be Will Chamberlain, Bill Russell, or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Those are the three answers for everything. So we hear NBA, we're just going in with that. And we got a couple right that way, but it was a vast chasm of no knowledge when it came to the
nothing,
NBA.
nothing. I love it.
I
I
don't
love
think they were gonna ask me which Gophers had played in the NBA. I don't think that was one of the questions. So I would have probably had that, but not
Maybe
so much.
maybe.
What's
it. Did
that?
you hear that? He said Whitey Skoog.
Whitey Skoog. Well, there's Trent Tucker, Ray Williams.
Oh, that was later, I think.
Yeah. Whitey Skoog, the jump shot. Absolutely.
Very good.
Yeah.
Jump shot.
What about Kevin McHale?
Jump shot didn't exist when I grew up.
Yeah, I know. He invented it.
Huh?
Whitey Skoog invented the jump shot, didn't he? Or many people claim it. I think he's
Wait,
one of them.
wait. We got to back up for a second on the jump
What?
shot, just because, the three of us do have basketball in common.
Yeah.
There was no jump shot.
No.
No, in the 50s and 40s.
How did you score points?
He just dribbled
The
in.
set shot. The set shot.
Set shot and,
Oh.
and dribble in.
Layup. Yeah. Backdoor
not
cut.
that I was very good at the jump shot. I was more of a, layup
No,
person.
I did play basketball in high school, and not my son who's going to turn 15 in a little bit, is taller than me. And he came up to me in the fall of this year or whatever, last year, and he said, "Did you really play varsity basketball at St. Paul Academy?" And I said, "Yeah, I played varsity basketball at St. Paul Academy." And he goes, "But you're so short." And I said, "Yeah, but I played dirty."
That's good. There again, there's another bit of the street smart. So,
Oh,
Martin,
yeah.
do you have a question for Dave?
No, I just could tell that speaking of short, my dad, who was 5'7", played basketball for Michigan 3 years.
Wow.
And
Yeah, I was thinking about that today. I knew we talked a little bit about sports, and I was never the most gifted athlete on my teams. But I always knew I could be the smartest athlete on my team. I could know where every nook and cranny was. I could know where, every person was going. I could know, the weaknesses of the other team quickly, so I could use my sports smarts, street smarts to kind of gain an advantage. Like, I remember when I learned how to go up with one hand on a jump to try to block a shot that I would never get to, while the hand down by my hip was subtly shoving him in the waist. But the referee always looks at the hand and the ball, never the hand down below. So he could always get that one.
did you ever consider coaching?
I wish I had coached. I coached my son's Little League team one summer. But I never really have coached. I think I would have enjoyed that a lot. I met with a guy today who's a longtime coach, a guy named Eric Vigo. And we talked about it, and it made me think, boy, I wish I had coached. I think I would have had a lot of fun. I could have taught them all the dark arts.
The other day.
Yeah, Mark said it to me that I should coach too. So maybe we should find a team and we could coach it. Did you ever coach, Mark?
No, I was captain of my team, but I never was a coach.
Yeah.
So from coaching to leadership, you've always been a leader, an executive, as well as after the reporting career, during the reporting career. Where are some of those similarities between sports and leadership?
There are a lot. There are a ton. I mean, I always loved team sports because it was all about leadership, and I always felt like I was a strong leader. One is building trust among people. I think a great leader builds trust. Otherwise, you're in everybody's business all the time and nobody can get anything done. You want to trust people to do their jobs. The other one is recognizing what you're good at and recognizing maybe what you're not good at. In high school, I played on a pretty successful football team, and I was probably, the sixth best player out of 11. But I knew that, and I was fine with that. And I knew how to take advantage of that and exploit it to make our team win, to make me feel excited about what I was doing. And they came to trust me that, I'd call the right play, or I'd know how to get out of this mess or that thing. And I think it's also leadership in sports is about also being willing to take risks. People love to go along to get along, but I think it's hard to be a successful leader unless you're willing to take the well-informed risk that could lead the organization or a group of people to a place they didn't imagine they could get to. I remember around the time I was in college playing sports, and I was, leadership comes in a lot of different places, and I was taking a group of campers on a camping trip, and I was the coach. I was the leader of the counselor. And we all received this plastic bucket, and we were told that if you get into a hard spot, take out the plastic bucket and see what's inside. And we would get to a hard spot, and they'd be like, "Oh, let's open the bucket." And I said, "Oh, no, it could get a lot tougher than this. You want to keep that bucket." And we were the only group, like in the history of this camp, that never opened the bucket.
Wow.
And it was cookies, and they were all crumbs at the end.
Cookies were in the bucket? I love it.
Yeah.
Mark, Do you want to answer the sports and leadership question?
Well, the thing that David said was, if you want to be a leader, and I was a leader on teams, and I was a leader in my business for many years, is trust, uh, but verify.
Oh
But
yeah.
the people that work for you or the people on your team have got to believe that they're being trusted by you, and then you, you have to let them be themselves. They can't be who they're not. And I'm sure you've got, or at least sounds like you've got that ability.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you one story. I was at Minnesota Public Radio the day Prince died, and I'm walking down into the newsroom. It's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We had a board meeting at the same time. I was going down to check on everything. I'm sure, I was sure everything was going fine, but I just wanted to show my face because I know there was a lot of stress and difficulty trying to cover this huge story for our music station, for a news station. And a guy taps me on the shoulder and he says, he was our head of events. And he said, what I see is a live event at First Avenue tonight celebrating Prince's life. Now you got to remember, it's 2 o'clock. So he's got about 3 hours to make it happen. Permits, police, everything. But I knew him well, and I knew what he could do if he was given the opportunity. And I just looked at him and I said, "You go do that." And that was the shot that every television network used, was that big crowd. They didn't have any police there to begin with. They had the mayor of St. Paul in Minneapolis as the only official, and he's like, "Hey, let's all be mellow here now." And it was but it was I would not have said yes to anybody who tapped me on the shoulder, but I knew his work and I knew what he had done and I believed in what his capabilities were. And when he wouldn't tap me on the shoulder unless he thought he could do it, and I knew he could do it, and so I had enough knowledge of who he was to take that risk, and that worked out.
And I have friends that went to that event. I didn't know that that was who had put it on, and they said it was a magical
Yeah.
evening, a moment for the city that they will never forget. And so I love you sharing that story and trusting in your person. So
Yeah,
Dad,
Jeff Nilica was the guy who did it, and I think he also knew that. Came back an hour and a half later, said we just can't do it. It was like that'd be okay too. I didn't expect him to like screw it up. Just I expected it either it was going to be great or he wouldn't do it.
yeah.
So
So
it turned out great.
one piece of advice, maybe just segueing from Prince, and we got to put Prince's link in here in Paisley Park because I haven't been there. Have you been to Paisley Park?
No, driven by it.
Yeah,
I knew the Chanhassen mayor when he died. That's as close as I got.
yeah. So they have a Mark. I don't know if you know where Prince recorded all his music at Paisley Park. They have I guess a great display. We should go. We should
Yeah.
go out there and check it out. So what sort of is one way you've gone about either keeping in touch with your network or expanding your network in your career?
Um, just trying to keep in touch with people, what they're doing. If I see someone so I've been in the writing game mostly. So if I see someone's got a great article, send them an email, say, "Hey, it's a great article, really liked it." Um, I've lived in a lot of different places, and when I blow into town, the place I used to live, I try to line up as many. Hey, I'm going to be in town. Let's get coffee. Stack them up, 7, 8, 9 coffees and a dinner each day, or something like that. To try to keep those relationships alive. Finding also, and I've not been as good at this, is finding ways to introduce things I'm doing as a way to connect. So, for instance, I'm working on my own website for my business. Once that's up and running, that'll give me an excuse to kind of say, "Hey, come have a look at my website." Or, when this podcast publishes, I'll say, "Hey, I just want you to see this conversation I had with the great papers." And I think, there's some good insights there. And, Cathy does great work in, Mark always kept me in check, that kind of thing, And so using excuses to not just, hey, let's get together, but hey, you should look at this, or hey, that was a great job, a little more. I've not been as good at that as I probably could have, but those are things that I've also had worked and I continue to work on. I mean, because keeping that network is always a challenge. You get to, trying to make sure you're keeping in touch with people. And I don't, I'm, some people, have everybody's birthday and send cards and all that stuff. I'm not as good at that. I leave that to, there are people much better than me at that. So.
I like though, and can we put the website name in the,
it's very easy. It's davekansas.com.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's not ready yet.
Question right, davekansas.com. So you didn't say what was the other team that you got wrong?
Oh, Kansas. Yeah. Oh, yeah. San Francisco? No, I didn't know.
Right. Dave San Francisco. davekansas.com. Awesome. Well, Kansas, we could talk a ton. And I know I heard the buzzer ring on things. Mark, do you have more questions for Dave or anything? Otherwise, I think Kansas, we may have to have you back when the website's live and we'll do another check-in and you guys can really run the table on sports trivia.
All right.
Or do you have one?
No, I'm good.
Well, I just wanted to say one quick thing. I love, Mark, that you said street smarts.
Yeah. Because
I always felt that was like my hidden secret superpower around those SPA kids.
Oh, I hear you. And of course, you understand it. And I think an interesting thing is a lot of people don't even understand what street smarts are.
Yeah. Head on a swivel. Yeah. And knowing where to go. Yeah, I imagine that you had to have a little bit of that yourself. So I think that's why we connect in that way and in many ways.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, guys. Have a great day. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for listening to the All-Star Networking Show with Cathy Paper. If you're interested in being a guest, please contact Cathy at www.rockpaperstar.com.